Hey there, Squirrel Army! How's it going? For today, we're discussing Delighted Halfling and finding some space in your EDH deck for this new staple. You can join the Squirrel Army by subscribing. Alright, so we're going in a bit of a different direction today with this one because I'm not really assessing this card that much because there's been probably a fair bit of assessment going on about how good this card is and whatnot. I don't think I need to tell you guys how good this card is, but I shouldn't have to, I don't think. Because it's a very good card, and I'm not really going to spend too much time talking about how good it is, because it's obviously very good. But for those people who perhaps don't know what this card is, haven't seen it yet and whatnot, I will go through it just a little bit here at the beginning as quickly as we can before we just start discussing the proper subject here. So it's a 1-mana dork 1/2. That's fine. Most mana dorks are 1/1s or whatever as well. So sure, it has one more toughness or whatever. That probably is pretty irrelevant for the most part. It means you can't skull clamp too easily, but whatever. That's small potatoes. It does just tap for colorless normally for the most part, which, that's fine. We've got Boreal Druid, I think it is, that taps essentially for a colorless as well, but it has that other ability to tap to add a mana of any color. You spend that mana only to cast a legendary spell, and that spell can't be countered. So obviously that's very, very good. Mana of any color, obviously very good, very reminiscent of Birds of Paradise. So that's quite good. And then adding that you can't have that spell be countered is really good. Yes, it has to be for legendary, but what format are we playing, boys and girls? Commander. EDH. We have a legendary in our command zone, and we can easily cast that. And again, I've said this a few times, they are printing so many more legendaries into the format now that it is utterly ridiculous how many creatures are legendary. You'll pinch yourself going, oh wait, this is a legendary? Oh, I didn't realize this was a legendary, because there are so many cards that are out there now that are legendary. Because a lot of the good cards are legends, so who'd have thunk? But anyway, so I'm not really going to talk too much about the assessment of how good this is, because it's obviously very good, as I sort of said. The issue now becomes, I guess to a degree, where do we find space to put this brand new staple in all of our decks? Now, I guess the answer isn't as plain and fast as anything, because you could inevitably, some people are going to say, well, I'll just replace a land or whatever, and that sort of thing, or I'll just replace one of my worst mana dorks or whatever. So, there is that, obviously, but which is the worst mana dork that you've kind of got? Like, especially if you're playing a lot of the 1-mana dorks, there's a couple other mana dorks that are okay. It depends what strategy you're playing. I like Catilda quite a lot. I think I've done a video about her. She's really good because she has that mana sink and she lets your humans tap for mana. So that's really, really powerful. So yeah, there's a few other mana dorks that are out there that kind of are pretty good. Like, so I always think about like the 1-mana dorks for the most part, and it does depend on what kind of deck you're kind of playing for the most part. But again, there is a bit of range out there in this. So you've usually got your Llanowar elves, your Findhorn elves, and your Elvish Mystics and things like that. Obviously, you got Birds of Paradise, but I think Birds, since it makes mana of any color, even if you don't need mana of any color, just that fixing when you really do need it is just super good. So it's just pretty useful anyway. There's no point in not running it to a degree. So, like, why not? And then you've got things like Sakura Tribe Elder, which is just really good. It's not the best card, I don't think, Sakura Tribe, but I think the fact that you can fog damage from something essentially a lot of the time is very good. You just keep people at bay from being able to attack you, and you get your land when you need it. So, it is bad. It is a bad, like, nature's law or 3 visits, but it's basically rampant growth on a creature. But still, that's pretty good because, again, you can fog damage. So, someone's combating you, and you're just like, nope, I'm going to go get land. Sorry, bro. No damage for you. So um, it starts becoming like, am I going to replace the land with this? I wouldn't, personally. I always find I have this terrible issue, though, of either getting no lands whatsoever, basically, at all, and sitting there and going, cool, I have all these spells, but no way of casting them because I've got no mana, because I've kind of got 1 or 2 lands or whatever, and everything in my hand is 3 or 4 or 5 or whatever else, and all I'm drawing is 3 and 4 and 5 drops or whatever else. Or I'm having the opposite problem of going, cool, land, 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 land. Like, here's 50 land on the top of my deck somehow. Okay, alright. Cool story, bro. But it is one of those things. I know a lot of people will take that easy route of just being like, I'm not going to think about it, I'm going to cut a land or whatever. Or I'm going to cut my, 5 mana dork or whatever it is. I don't know. But then again, I don't know how many people are playing like 5 mana dorks nowadays, or even 2 mana or even 3 mana dorks. It has, like, a lot of the mana dorks that you see played nowadays are, the very cheap ones, or the ones that have a lot more potential later on, because, again, you don't want to play that 2 mana dork when you could play a 1 mana dork at 1 cheaper, taps sooner, does more, so much more well worth it. But when you say, oh, well, I've got this mana dork that, it untaps every time I play a 5-drop, and most of the rest of the deck is 5-drops. It might be 3 mana, but I basically get 3 or 4 activations out of it when I cast my spells and that. So that's really, really useful. So there are a few exceptions that are out there. Like, there's a few that are out there that are, 4 or 5 mana that are pretty darn decent because they tap for multiple mana, or they let your other creatures tap for multiple mana and that sort of thing. So they can be very good. Some are very specific. So it does depend on what your deck is and what your deck is doing. In my decks, I'm going to have to seriously think about what I'm actually replacing this with in certain decks, especially my tokens deck, because my tokens deck is very white heavy, and having another green creature in there that messes up the, balance of green versus white in that deck will be quite bad. So I've got to actually probably take out one of my other mana dorks for this. Now, yes, given that, again, it's probably better than Fyndhorn Elves or Elvish Mystic or Llanowar Elves, it's probably one of those. But which one of those? Like, there's no really good answer to that extent. Like, which one is objectively the worst, which one's objectively the best. Like, and it depends on the deck, again, of what you're actually doing. Like, in certain decks, I want the human subtype, because, again, I have a Catilda deck, so the human subtype really matters to that deck, because, again, I can tap it for green because, hey, it's green and it's a human, so that works out well for that deck. So I can tap it for green, or tap it for colors, or tap it for any mana, and then protect my legendary from being countered. But that deck honestly doesn't need that much ramp, because, again, Catilda's there to do most of the ramping, but then again, it's still really good because, again, it can activate that ability, or it can just help ramp out other things. And again, just mana of any colors, just so good, especially with Catilda being there in the command zone, it makes it really good. But again, it's going to be a tough ask in some people's decks, I can guess. But again, I always find that a lot of people are running a lot of bad ramp for the most part. Like, they don't really know what they're doing with their ramp package and whatnot. And I don't really understand it. I don't understand how there's so many guides that are out there about ramp packages and whatnot, that sort of thing, that, you would think people had got a better package of ramp out there, but obviously not. There's still people that are out there playing very bad mana rocks in green decks, and I'm like, dude, you're in green. You don't even need these mana rocks. What are you doing? Or whatever. But still, it's one of those things. It does depend on what you're doing. If you're an instant sorcery deck, it's a bit different. If you're in a, you know, a one of the weird decks that's in green that actually cares about artifacts, which is only like maybe 5 or so, then yeah, sure, it's a bit different. But again, for the most part, I just see this in nearly every deck. So it's just one of those things that I always find weird about the way people sort of do things. I'll see people like playing a 2-color signet or whatever in their 4-color deck. And I'm like, dude, what are you doing with this 2-color signet? Why aren't you playing, something that taps for multiple mana of different colors? Like, what are you doing? So it's a bit weird how people put their decks together sometimes. I'm always confused about how people sort of come to this decision. I know some people do that with me too, but I still always play the way that I play, which is, simple, basic aggro decks. So, that's the thing, like I've got to get my creatures out and turn them sideways and win somehow. So, that's the way for me. But again, like the way that those decks are built and focused and whatnot, that sort of thing about, well, what's this deck doing? Well, it's playing creatures for the most part. So, what does my deck want to do? Well, play creatures. So anything that cares about playing creatures, or if I have one type, like again, human, it can be really good. So there is that as well. So it's just one of those things that, can be very powerful in the right deck. And, you often think to yourself, well, it's not going to be as good as something else, like a much higher deck. But again, because it's so focused, it has that strength to its core about being focused on mostly one thing. So it doesn't really lack that much because, again, it has mostly got a specific focus in a specific direction. Though, again, I will say that there is a few cards here and there that are artifacts and enchantments that are in a couple of the decks that I do play that I would go, maybe I could do without this and just have more ramp, because it is a thing that you often need a lot of ramp. You often need a fair bit of ramp, but the thing of it is you always as well need something to do with all that ramp, which is again why I think Catilda is really good, because again it gives you that thing to do with all that mana when you've got really not a whole lot else going on. It's like, oh, okay, cool, I'll just activate my ability and get some counters on my dudes and go from there, like hopefully I'll draw a lot of gas soon, but it can be one of those things that too much mana can be a problem, and I do see that in some decks. But again, that's another thing about consistency. It depends how consistent your deck is, and again, if your deck is a very low to the ground deck and draws a whole lot of cards very quickly and very easily because you're a commander, because, you're just playing, a lot more Rhystic Studies or whatever else, Mystic Marauders and things like that, or Rhystic Buddies or whatever else it is, then there could be other reasons for you to not want to think about playing that space up for certain things, because again, well, I'm going to not need that many lands in that kind of deck anyway, because again, so many of my other cards are Moxes and 0-drops or 1-drops or whatever. So again, I've got all this fast mana for the most part, and again, I'm not really going to need to worry too much about the rest, because again, I'm just going to get going so quickly, and I have so much card draw and card advantage that, again, it doesn't really matter. So, again, it's tough to sort of say specifically about which card or whatever you decide, but again, just like, again, if it depends what your commander is too, because again, if especially when you are playing those faster formats, you probably got a smaller commander or lower drop commander for the most part, again, so you've got to, unless you're just like playing something for the colors or whatever and that sort of thing. But again, you're taking one card out of your deck for a nothing card, so I don't think that that's really a very good idea. For the most part, you want your commander to actually be functional to your deck in some regard at some points. Like, it doesn't need to be everything to your deck, but again, like, sometimes you haven't got much choice or whatever it is, but again, because you want to be Grixis and there's no really good Grixis commanders for what you want to do, or whatever color pairing or color combination you want to discuss, they're just not that commander that you think, oh, that's really good for the deck that I'm trying to do, whatever the strategy or the power level that I'm looking for. So again, it can be tough to sort of figure that out. So again, those are mostly the ways that I would look at it. I would look at it like, again, what are you doing and why? What's it going into for the most part? How is it going to fit into that deck? Because again, don't just cut a land and go, oh, this will be fine, because it definitely won't. But yeah, it's tough to say that you always should cut another mana dog, because again, you have that going of, well, I always need mana early on, and this is mana early on for me. So again, I probably want more mana dorks and want more ramps, so it's probably pretty good for me to put it in the deck and not cut another mana dork or whatever. But then what else am I going to cut? Like, then I've got to cut. I can't cut removal probably, and I can't cut card draw probably either. So I've got to cut one of my synergy cards probably, or whatever, or one of the more lackluster cards that's perhaps not doing me as much as something else, perhaps, so that, again, I can fit this kind of in there. That, or you just have to swallow that bullet and say, oh, well, I will just cut a mana dork or whatever it is. So it's a really tough decision to decide what you actually cut for this. But you definitely have to make a cut for this, I think. It's just one of those cards that's, now a new staple for the format. So, yeah. But you guys can always let me know what you guys think. Write your thoughts down there in the comments below. Hope you've enjoyed and hope you'll join me again in the next one.